turn the corner, and there is something sitting in this dentist chair.
Oh, is that a church? Yeah, the hole.
Well, hello everyone. Friday Night Frights. Whoa. Something is hot. Hold on. Well, let's see if we can fix this. Alright. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for being here. And Morgan, you're online, right?
Yeah, Sean, I'm here. It's actually a little bit fuzzy now, though. It's hard to hear you.
That's what I'm hearing too, and I'm not sure why to do that.
Oh, no.
It was working perfectly. Okay, 1 second.
One second. Try to do this.
Huh. Test.
Test.
Let's see here. Test.
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 Nope, it's still all weird.
Weird. Yeah.
Oh man.
Man.
Alright, let me do this.
Let me do this one.
Stop that feed.
That feed.
Maybe it'll help.
Maybe it'll help.
Oh, come on.
Come on.
Facebook is
Facebook is killing me.
Oh man.
Oh, man.
Alright, it looks like I might have to ship and let me restart. Alright, hold on everybody. We'll be back on in just a second. Now it sounds like it's fine. Are you there? Nope, I think we lost everybody. Alright, there we go. We tried Facebook again and it let us down. We're going to try this one. Oh, now it sounds like. Alright, forget Facebook. I'm done with them. Alright, are you there, Morgan? Nope, sounds like I've lost you altogether now. Gosh darn it. Okay.
Hello, Chad. Hello, Chad.
Hello.
Hey.
That sounds great.
Okay, good. Yes, I could hear you. You could not hear me, so I logged out and logged back in.
Awesome. All right.
Awesome.
I'm just going to hit start on our feed here.
Okay.
All right. He was in there twice. All right. So now we're over on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
I have tried Facebook so many times, and it just let me down every single time.
Oh, man. I can relate to the frustration of that kind of thing when you're trying to, I often have to be on three-way phone calls with a recording going on, and sometimes my phone doesn't want to take act like it's ignoring the fact that I'm touching a keypad, and so I get it.
It's so brutal. I don't know why technology just can't do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Such a double-edged sword, isn't it?
It really is. It's unfair. Well, I want to thank you for being on with us. And first of all, introduce yourself a little bit.
All right. Well, Chad, yeah, thanks so much for having me on as well. And also thanks for reaching out to me. So, my name's Morgan Reeser, and I'm here to talk a little bit about the Bowers Mansion in Palestine, Texas, and how paranormal ghost hunting has basically um, kind of come at us from two different angles. To one extent, it sort of kept knocking at my door, and on the other side of the fence, the house has a really cool history and has had a lot of interest in the past, but the previous owners um, weren't. It wasn't, something they were necessarily looking to look into or anything. So it hasn't had a whole lot of opportunity for investigation up until recently. So
Right.
there has been that element of, you know, the story of what went on there, and then okay, so what's actually underneath, and how can we get in there?
Nice. So, how did you guys feel about taking over the mansion? Was it like you found it and or did you investigate it once and
So I'll tell you that. So the paranormal part, as far as investigating it, didn't come into the scene until a little bit more recently because that wasn't on my radar or my mom's radar. So my mom and so my mom lives in Palestine and she has a home there and she loves to restore Victorian homes. Her name's Jane, and that's really her passion. It's her forte. I mean, it's like why she's here on Earth. She's so good at it, and she really understands how to communicate with a house and connect with it and bring out its best features and honor its history. So I guess it was December 2019, the house was on the market. It's right around the corner from where she lives. So I was there for Christmas, and we got to talking, and she's like, hey, do you want to, go for a walk and we can go see the house? And next thing you know, she's like, well, maybe I should just call Mary Alice, who my mom is just one of those people that seems to pick up, houses left and right. If anything, you'd be like, oh, she's got another house. But so it's just something that just has been part of her life and a passion that she has. So next thing you know, we're calling Mary Alice and we're over there looking at the house. Um, Before you know it, a couple of months went by, and it's decided to uh, get the house, and really not knowing what we were going to do with it, except that it deserved to be, fixed up to an extent that would really honor what it is, and it's part of the National Historic Registry of Homes in the United States, so not just the state, but the national registry. So she could really see the potential. She has all of the skills and the knowledge and the wherewithal, and so we were going to do some stuff together and then just see where it took us. And COVID had just sort of ramped up, so it was a good time to hunker down and take on a project. And so we really just started with the carriage house, and that part, there's actually three structures on the property. So it has the main house, the Bowers Mansion, and then the carriage house, which was, the barn essentially, and then a servant's quarters. And so we did restore the upper part of that carriage house so that there was an apartment type structure up there. And then the house, for the most part was and has been a very slow process. And that, you know, is for a lot of different reasons. But most recently, so my mom has been spending a lot of time taking the old paper, the wallpaper off of the walls in the men's and the women's parlor downstairs. And we just recently finished ripping up all of the carpet and, pulling out all of the nails and staples that comes along with that. But as she has been doing that, she's actually revealed the original wallpaper that was in the women's parlor when the house was built, or around the time it was redone, or I guess around the time the Bowers lived there. So, but that's essentially how we came about acquiring the property. It was very much, a local thing, being in the neighborhood, seeing all of these beautiful historic homes in Palestine that have so much to offer. kind of go one way or the other. And this house could have gone the other way at one point in time because it was unfortunately like dormant for a long period of time in the 70s and then vandalized as well. But it did have a big restoration. I think it was also in the 70s at one point, and that was probably the last time it had significant work done. And then it was a bed and breakfast actually for some time. So that would be some of the latter history, and in a few minutes we'll get into some of the much older Bowers history that I'm sure a lot of people are curious about. So then, really like okay, and then just to tie in the paranormal, just a little bit background before we get into um, the story of the house too. So, I mean, I grew up in Victorian homes, old Victorian homes, just because this is again my mom. And
Right.
so the house I grew up in on the North Fork of Long Island in New York. I mean, I had experiences all of the time that I was convinced, that house had activity, and when I was a kid and a teenager and all of that stuff. And maybe you're just a little bit more sensitive to it as well when you're that young. So for a long time as an adult, and I lived in different states, I really didn't have any experiences. But whenever I thought back to living in that house, in Long Island, man, I have a lot of memories. So when I moved into the Bowers, of course I was aware of its history and the story, but I really didn't give it any thought. And on a whole, it feels good, in there. It doesn't feel icky or weird or creepy, to me anyway. And so I just went about my business and started, sleeping there and whatnot. And I certainly began having some experiences from time to time and of varying degrees and of different things. And it really started to bring me back to when I was a child and all of the experiences I was having then. And I was like, okay, so that's interesting. Um, but I'll stop there for a minute and I'll let you take over and, ask me whatever you want. But that I hope gives you a little bit of the history of like how we
Yeah.
stumbled across it and, where we're kind of going from there. But it was haphazard in a way.
Nice. I love the fact that your mom loves to restore buildings. It's kind of a passion of mine too to see the old brought back to new because they just did things so much better.
Hmm.
We don't get this kind of architecture anymore. Now it's just look at my flat building with some stone.
Yeah.
Oh, and it drives me crazy. Where's the beauty? It's like even when you look at our car, where's the style?
Yeah, and then you think about what it would cost to build that today, right?
Yeah, here's the cheap car that's $100,000.
Yeah, so it's priceless. It's priceless. You gotta fix it up, but it's priceless.
Absolutely. I mean, in the construction technique, I've been in a bunch of these old homes like this on a whole nother level. I mean, they're just built far more solid, which is a testament to why they can be vacant for 40 years and still be in fairly great condition.
Yeah, yeah, that is pretty neat for
Homes,
sure.
40 years vacant, they're done. So, tell us a little bit about the history because I've looked some of it up, but let's tell everybody kind of how the house started and got to.
Yeah, so you cut out just a little bit there at the end. So you said how the house started.
Yeah, and then how it became to have the activities.
Ah, right. Good question. So yeah, some of my favorite parts. I really love the history and the stories, and I think the stories really bring the house to life. And I think that's what's so important to my mom too. But that's something that's helped me bond with it a little bit more, especially someone coming in who I grew up again. I grew up in around this, but that's not particularly my passion. So the stories of the families and what's gone on has really helped me develop more of a relationship with the place. So a lot of the history that we've come across came from a woman who works at the library who is known as the historian of Palestine. And she gave me a huge folder of stuff. And so basically, it was actually two things here. Last February, just randomly got a call out of nowhere, and this person was like, "Oh, hey, are you Morgan?" And you're like, "Who's asking?" But anyway, I was like, "Oh yeah." So he was a paranormal investigator. Has his own little team, very small, and I had messaged, the house, the previous owner of the house on Facebook at some point, but had learned that there were new owners, something like that, and so wanted to check in and see if it was not, an open opportunity again, or it was going to be an open opportunity to get in. So that kind of was on my radar at first, but um, as far as the paranormal, stuff went. And I thought, oh, how funny. I had no idea that anybody was even like interested in this and interested in this around here. And, we just figure like we, live with this stuff in these houses and whatever. But, and I, to be honest, I don't have television. So like I really had very little idea about the trends that's going on too with it. So it just kind of opened my eyes a little bit, but it was one of those things where it just came knocking on your door, and you're like, okay, well, this is already what I'm in, living around. But so I was curious myself. I was like, what can we see here further? Because there's only so much you can experience, with your naked eyes and with your five senses or whatever. So, but the Bowers, so and this is also because their history intrigued me, which is why I mentioned this, because I started to, bond a little bit with the family, and I was like, if you're in here, I want to talk to you, you know. So the Bowers acquired the house from a previous owner around the turn of the century, and they basically started to do some restoration, some renovations on it, and changed a little bit um, once they acquired it. And some of the big things that they did are actually still historic to the house today. They, brought in some really big and beautiful ebonized wood mantles from Italy for the men's and the women's parlor, and they're still there, very original and beautiful with the blue Italian tile. It's really cool. So they really put a lot of like time and effort into the house, and they really love the house. And so is Mr. Andrew Bowers Sr. and then his wife Nellie, and they acquired the place, and they had quite a few children. And there are a couple little like mysteries in there that I'm not sure how it works out, but this is what I've found so far. So um, they had a they had an older daughter named Irene, and then they had another daughter named Mabel. And Irene and Mabel, as far as I know, they lived their lives out, and they had long, full lives other places. And Irene did pass away in the 70s, and I'm not sure if Mabel's alive not still or not, but they're not necessarily part of any of the people that passed away in the house, but definitely children that grew up there. And then, so you have Andrew Bowers Jr. He was one of the sons, and he was the one that has a little bit of a more significant history in the house. And then they also had another son named Bernard, and I'll tell you a little bit about him as well. And then there's another relative named Willie B. Casey. Now, I believe Willie B. Casey was maybe a nephew. I'm not really sure exactly how he fits into the picture, but he's definitely a relative of the Bowers, and in the Bowers cemetery plot in St. Joseph's Cemetery in Palestine, he has the biggest, or one of the biggest tombstones, and one of the oldest tombstones in there. And he died at age 19. And if I remember correctly, he was born and died before before it was actually 1900s. So he was pretty. He would have been older than some of the other Bowers children. But I mention him because Willie B. Casey is a very active spirit in the house, very active, and yeah, I just have so many questions about him. I have I have the death certificates for the other family members, but I don't have his. But again, he's got this big tombstone in their cemetery plot, and a lot of the words on a lot of the letters have sort of faded out, from time and the weather. But if you run your run your fingers over them, you can make them out, and it's just this beautiful, send off to heaven, I guess. And I'm not sure what happened to him, but he is active. He is there. Willie B. Casey, so 19 years old, pretty cool. But getting back to the children, so I mentioned Andrew Bowers Jr., and then I mentioned Bernard. So Andrew Bowers Jr., he was one of the older sons. He did marry a woman named Mary. So Andrew Bowers Jr. and Mary were married, and they lived in that house for a time as well. They actually did inherit the house, and there was some contention, perhaps, rumor has it, amongst other family members, because Andrew Bowers Jr. was kind of known as like the slippery, one of the family members. He did have some drug problems, which, he did have some prescriptions for the drugs that he took, but, he was just a little bit, as far as I know, unstable, hot-tempered, and used drugs readily for a condition he had, but also it had become a big part of his life, and actually led to his downfall in the end. So then Bernard, the other son, just to jump back to him real quick. So he, from what I know, and I have his death certificate too, he died at age 30. This was around 1927, if I remember correctly. And he had a congenital heart condition. So he actually lived most of his life confined to the second story of the house, which I found really fascinating. And they enclosed the upper two sleeper porches for him so that he could have a bird aviary. And he really loved birds. And they did have a noisy parrot at one point in time who like to cuss in the yard. Apparently, again, this is all from stuff I've read. So yeah, exactly. And there's this really cool shower that was built for Bernard in the back in the family bathroom, which is all original, and it's kind of creepy looking. It's pretty, funky looking shower, but it was really just to help him hold himself up, to stabilize him. And there was like some interesting features, like a liver massage and things like that, because he had this condition. So he did die in the house, and that was around again, I don't have my death certificate in front of me, so I apologize, but I think it was around 1927, because his father, Andrew Bowers Sr., died right before him 1 year earlier, and that was 1926. So I'm pretty sure I have my dates right. So Andrew Bowers Sr. died of gangrene, and that was in 1926. And then his son Bernard died a year later in 1927, and he had that congenital heart condition, so he was 30. Nellie, the wife of Andrew Bowers Sr., died a bit later. I don't remember the date she died. It wasn't terribly later, but several years later. And she also had a heart condition. And I don't know if hers was congenial or what, but she lived a long time, and then she died from a heart condition. And then the most infamous story of the Bowers mansion, that fateful day on June 6th. Okay, let me make sure I get this straight. Wow, when you don't when you don't say something every day, but anyway, June 6th, 1956, Andrew Bowers Jr. had been up all night, very unstable apparently, and had been drinking. And I think there was some premeditation to the suicide that came next, but because there was a note, at least supposedly there was a note. But he did. He was up all night, and then that next morning, he went upstairs to his wife Mary's room and ended up killing her that morning. And then he went downstairs after taking his wife's life and took his own life. So he shot himself in the women's parlor, and the bullet that killed him actually went through the east window of that room, which was a stained glass window at the time. So unfortunately, it's not stained glass anymore. But he did call an ambulance for his wife, Mary, before he shot himself. And next door to the Bowers mansion is actually a funeral parlor. It's been there for a very long time. It actually used to be a huge Victorian house itself. So he did call, and then they did come over. So the guys that came over from the funeral parlor, um, they heard the shot as they were entering the back door of the house. They heard the shot that took his own life. And so that was that fateful day in June, where Bowers Jr. and Mary died.
That's crazy.
Yeah, isn't it?
Wow, it's funny. We actually have a our own on my mom's mother's side, um, 3 generations back. Her uh, son-in-law shot her great grandma, and she died from that, which was I don't know what the backstory is, but for years, but it made the newspaper. Native American, and I don't know if that's what it was over, and he was upset about it or what, but that's tragedy.
Yeah, it is. It is a tragedy. Yeah, definitely. Well, but they left a bit of a legacy with their story and their place there. So
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the pictures of it, and the home is absolutely gorgeous.
it
So
yeah, it definitely is.
you were mentioning Blue Italian stuff. My wife is a huge fan of the Blue Italian, and trying to get me to remodel our house, kind of thing. She's gonna win that argument.
Yeah, isn't she?
Yeah,
Ah.
she's already bought all the chicken, and she's got China patterns from 200 years ago already bought. And I lost like a year ago.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, tell me, like, what's the top three? What would you call the top three pieces of paranormal activity that people can expect or anticipate when going to?
Yeah, great question. So I would definitely tell you that I'll give you a little bit more information on our popular one. I'll give you something that surprised the heck out of me, and I'm still like, figuring out. And then I'll tell you a personal story. So, all right. Okay. So our common buddy guy there, who I already mentioned, Willie B. Casey, um, he wants to be, from what I gather, he wants to be a part of something, it feels like. But he's definitely um, reserved. And I would say that pretty much all of the spirits there are, um, you know, if you seek them out and you are curious about them, then they will reveal themselves to you. But they're not necessarily looking to be disturbed too much, from what I've found. But they're responsive when they feel, like everything's, being respected and people are curious. And so Willie B. Casey, I think, is just a little bit more curious than the others at this time. So, I've experienced him a lot. And I think that um, this might sound a little funny, and I'm not even sure about this myself, but there's a lot of flickering lights in that place. And of course, the electric was probably redone last in the 70s, so I'm sure there is a need to update certain things. But the extent of the flickering lights, sometimes it's like different sometimes, and it feels very pronounced where you feel like the dang light bulb is communicating with you, and you're like, okay, I'm talking to a light bulb, and I have chills up my spine, like this is nuts. But where it's got like a rhythm to it, and it's doing different things, not just flickering a little bit, but then also getting really bright and then dimming, and then you feel like it's responding to your questions. So like, okay, Willie, I have a feeling that he's trying to find ways to communicate, and maybe the lights are kind of an easy way for him. I don't know. But that's kind of what I've started to get. It took me a really long time to put it together because at first, I would ignore it a lot. And then finally I was starting to feel like, okay, these lights are, what's going on? Like where you get on the chair and then you screwing everything in really tight. And you're like, everything's really tight now, all the bulbs are tight. So you go through this process where you're trying to do this like rationalization and process of elimination and all that. And then finally, I came to the point where I thought and just accepted, like, okay, sometimes whatever is here is communicating through the lights. And then finally, I was like, okay, I think it's Willie who's communicating through the lights. And now I'm going to try and communicate back. And so it's been such a process and so many stages and not an immediate thing, It's very organic, I guess. Um, but cool. So now I feel like he's broken that barrier for me because now I have had conversations, at least in my opinion, conversations with this spirit, whereas the other, I never really acknowledged as much in the past. I didn't say like, oh, come on in and take a seat if you're in here, Whereas now I've said that. I've been like, hey, are you in the room right now? You know, sit down or whatever. Or I'll ask a question. So Willie B. Casey is a fun one, and he bops around the house. He'll be in different places. So I think he kind of follows the activity. So it's just like an easy one, if you will. And then there's that mystery around him. We don't really know much about him. So who is he? What's his story? So there's that. And then this is kind of neat, kind of cool. So I mentioned the funeral parlor before across the street. It's the Bailey Funeral Home. It's been there for a very, very long time, a very, very, very long time. And out in the driveway, there's a huge cement driveway. We've had spirits there who have claimed to have come over from the funeral parlor. And then other one or two psychics that had mentioned something about a portal and the funeral parlor. And so there's a lot of like mystery sort of shrouded around that. But we do seem to have some visitors sometimes. And there's one fellow in particular named George who shows up, and I'm not sure of his story entirely. I can't quite get it straight. Something about maybe having been in a car accident out front on Magnolia there, something about being 42 years old, um, um, some things of that nature. But then we've looked around the cemetery plot where the Bowers are, and there are a couple of Georges there too. And I've had, some other people say, George might be this guy or that guy, and George is a liar, and George is funny pants, and George is George this or George that. But yeah, so some activity in regards to the funeral parlor, and maybe like some crossover or some portal. And there's a mirror that's in the dining room that I've been told a couple of times now has some portal-like activity. So I have not investigated that at all myself. This is just what I've been told from groups that have come through there, and that includes the investigators. But I'll tell you this, which I have been have looked into, I guess you could say. We've had some videos just running in the background for periods of time. And at the top of the staircase, which is would be the staircase that Andrew Bowers Jr. traversed that morning that he took Mary's life. He would have went up that staircase that morning with the gun, and then at the top he would have pretty much went straight into her room across the top of the staircase. And to the right of that, at the top of the staircase there, on the wall there, there's it was just video activity, just video stream going for long periods of time there, and it picked up lots of different orbs. And the orbs the different orbs that have been picked up have been plentiful. And I know orbs can be kind of tricky from the little bit that I know, but some of the orbs captured in this video footage, which happened to be on the the YouTube channel that I started, which is very, amateur and minimal, but they're cool because they come in at this weird sort of right angle and they're saucer shaped, so they're very disc-like looking and angular, and they sort of like shoot in. I'm using my hands, no one can see me, and then make like a weird right angle and then shoot out of view. And it just makes you shake your head because you're like, what was that? But right at the top of the staircase there to the right, which would have been like that area, where Andrew Bowers went through, and I don't know if that has anything to do with it. But that is something that I was able to see with my two eyes, on the video footage several times. And for me, when they mentioned this whole portal thing, I thought, well, if anything, if maybe it's at the top of the stairs, because that felt very ET to me. It didn't feel ghost. It felt very ET. But so who the hell knows? But if there's a portal, we got the ETs coming in. And I actually, not to change subjects, but I have had some interesting dream experiences there that were more vivid than anything in my life before, with some extraterrestrial grays, and I've never had that before in my life. So I've had some interesting experiences in that house that have ranged, on all ends of the spectrum of paranormal, different dimensions.
That's awesome.
Yeah, very cool. So that was cool. And then that kind of ties into my last one, which is my personal story. So this is probably my favorite, and it may not be anything like super cool to anyone else, but for me it was so significant. And I think if you pick up on like subtleties, or you like subtleties, then it would be, sound cool to you too. So this is going back a ways when I first was in there. So I guess it was November 2020. And I had a lot of activity that month. And I didn't really know what was going on because everything was so new to me. Just a lot of stuff in general. And I was also meditating a lot then. So my journal and my dream diary and everything, when I look back at that, it was just like packed full of oddities. And I had, it was also like a high stress time. So, sometimes when you're under a lot of pressure, under a lot of stress, things can be a little, shaky, a little funny. And it almost seems like it makes it more opportune for, I don't know, weird things to happen or whatever. So anyway, I'm going to jog my memory here a little bit, but, and I haven't told the story in a while. So let me think about this. Okay, so I had left the house for the night, and I went to an event, and it was an event in Ennis, and it was actually a CE5. And I'm not sure if you've heard that term before, but it's Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, and it's a extraterrestrial protocol intentional contact. And this was not part of my life in the past, but this was again something that just fell into my lap at the time and fit into where I was in my path, and actually did fit into things in my past. It's just that I wasn't ready for that in the past. You know what I mean? So this group in Ennis just sort of appeared into my life, and I thought, oh, wow. So, and it really was in line with a lot of the authors that I had read in the past, but I just never put two and two together. So anyway, I had gone to this event, and the CE5 is a protocol that was developed by Dr. Stephen Greer, and it's this, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. So it's this intentional, meditation-based contact, and it was my first time going. So I was there for several hours, and I actually did camp there. So I didn't even come home that night. And there was a lot of meditation. And then I went to sleep that night, and I had a very vivid dream. One of those paralytic type experiences where you can't move, but you're aware. And in this dream, I had this animal-like thing coming towards me that I really had no name for. I could just see its picture. And then one day I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, actually, Morbid. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Those girls are great, Morbid podcast. But they were talking about a story about the chupacabra, and I decided to go because it was like striking a nerve with me. I was like feeling very emotional, and so I decided to Google the chupacabra, and I saw an image of it. And I was like, oh my God, that's what I saw in that dream. That when I was paralyzed and it was coming at me. And that was that night that I was at that CE5 contact thing, right? So then the next morning, I went home, and this is crazy and may not be relevant at all, but I'm going to include it. I get home, I see my back doors open. So somebody got into the house and robbed the house and, took things, of course. That's what they do when they rob a house. And so it was very disturbing and high stress and, all this like turmoil. And, you got to deal with the fact that your house, you've been violated in that way. Um, Anyway, so I sort of get resolution, things are going back to normal, right? And I feel like activity was ramping up at that time a lot, and maybe it was this disturbance, all this disturbance in the field, I don't know. Also, I said my meditations were getting really intense, and ooh, who knows? So, anyway, I'm just trying to get some like sense of normalcy to my life back there, and I had to order a new computer, because my computer was gone. So what happened was I get home, and after I sort of like get back to normal a little bit, I'm unpacking my things, and I realized like a really special pin of mine was missing, and I couldn't find it. And I was wearing it that night at the event. And this is just a pin that says soul on it, but it was like really special to me, and I would wear it pretty much all the time. So I couldn't find this pin, and I looked through all my bags, and I had remembered, where it was in the past. So you do that thing over a course of days where you keep like looking through, bags and emptying them out, and oh, it's not there. So, but I figured it would turn up, and just went about my business. And then I had to order that new computer, which I mentioned, right? So about 10 to 12 days later, the new computer came in the mail. So brought the computer in the house and doing the thing, setting it up. And a couple hours later, I decided I was going to take a bath. So I had the bath ready, and I was about to get into the bath. And I had this voice inclination to go and put the computer box that the computer came in and all of that stuff away. Whatever away was, I had no place for it, whatever. But it was just this like feeling, this strong feeling like go into the other room and go put that computer box away. So, I'm like getting in the bath. I mean, I'm naked, but of course, so I'm like, okay, well, I just got to go do this task. So I go and collect the computer box from the other room. But as I did that, I just walked into the other room, and I like looked down to the computer box, and I saw the pin. And the reason why I mention this computer box and why this is significant is because I didn't have that computer in that house until that day, 12 days later, when it arrived in the mail, right? So whoever returned that pin to me did it in such a way that I couldn't deny it, because I would have denied it, by putting it in this thing that wasn't even in my home until like 4 hours prior to that. And, I looked down and I saw the pin, and I thought, huh, and I picked it up, and I walked out of the room, and I went into the bathroom, and I got into the bath, and I held the pin, and I didn't put the computer box away. And I was just like, wow. And I wasn't like overly excited or anything. It was just very calm and serene. But I knew that pin came back to me. I don't know how. I don't know how. Yeah, I mean, if it was on the floor, if it was on my bed, if I found it in the closet, I would have not, I would have been like, okay, so, I missed it somehow. But the fact that it was in that damn Mac computer box that I just brought into the house 4 to 5 hours earlier, I thought, what in the hell? So.
That's one to make you scratch your head and just go.
Yeah, so I don't know about that one to this day. And again, I don't know where it falls into the whole mix, but yeah, it's pretty cool. And other than that, there's just been a lot of just there's a bathroom with a shower in the front part of the house, which is where Mary's bedroom and dressing room would have been. So it wasn't a bathroom at the time, but it would have been like her dressing room. And there's a little balcony out in front there where people have said to have seen her rocking on the rocking chair there. But that, several times where I've been in the shower there, I've heard rapping on the windows there. And then the smoke detector has gone off several times. But if I go out, I get out of the shower every time for all of these things. I get out of the shower, I'm dripping wet. And then as soon as I get underneath that smoke detector, it stops, and normally you have to, poke it or take the battery out. No, I get near it and it stops. So, I don't know, but
That sounds like something nice would do right there.
so yeah, Mary has a sweet energy, from what I can tell. And Andrew Bowers Jr., he's a little bit like disgruntled, it seems. And then Andrew Bowers Sr., so he really, he loves his men's parlor. He likes his cigars. They like their whiskey, and he doesn't like a lot of women in his men's parlor. So there's been a couple occasions when there's been like a lot of women in there, and the the disgruntled voices that have come through have been very strong, dare I say harsh. And then as more women exited the room, he calmed down. So anyway, see what you can find.
Yeah. Well, I am looking forward to coming and investigating here. Our little team is mostly family, so we really enjoy things together. The family that investigates together sticks together. Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. My niece and my daughter kind of got me and my sister-in-law started, and my wife jumped in, and then my other niece and nephew from my older brother. They found out I was doing this, like, oh my God, Uncle Chuck, you got to take it with you. We've just kind of expanded a bit, and we love doing it together. So we are all really excited about coming and investigating.
Well, we're really excited to have you too, and I love your energy, and I could tell, just from that first interaction that you're definitely doing a lot for the community, and I think that's great. Because there's so many cool places out there that have that history, and when you can, I find that so many of the people that I meet, they're in it not just they're in it because of the history too. It's like that's what their connection is. They want to know the stories of the people, and it's very genuine. I like that.
Yeah, I love the history. The history just gets me. Like here recently, been really doing a lot of research on my family tree. There's not a lot of information on it because my mother's family is all Native American. So you get back one generation and it gets forward. And we get back to like the second generation of my grandmother, and records become almost impossible to find. So really trying to begin. And my own family has turned me into a person who craves the knowledge. I love it. But speaking of craving the knowledge, anybody else know the best way to contact you guys?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for asking. So I think at this point in time, everything's very new for us, and we really appreciate the interest. It's been such a cool experience and learning a lot. So, excuse me. Pardon me. The Bowers Mansion Restoration Facebook page is a great way to just see what's going on. And if you connect with us through the messenger there, at this point, that's like your best option.
Okay, that's how I got in touch with you guys. I was looking for other places. You guys popped up, and I'm like, let's go down this route.
Yeah, that sure is. And yeah, and through the Bowers Mansion Restoration page on Facebook, you can, if you scroll through the feed, you'll come across the YouTube page. And again, I'm got a lot going on, so it's not something that I get to often, but I did get just a couple little things out there just to give people a little bit of background knowledge. And some of that, like that footage I mentioned about that disc-shaped orb, for lack of a better description, is there in one of the videos, along with a couple other cool ones. And, even though they're hard to see, I do slow it down. So forgive my amateur skills. Yeah, I'm not, a great editor at this point, but I do enjoy it. But yeah, you can see that there. And so if you just scroll back in the feed, you can find that YouTube link.
Excellent. Well, Morgan, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for opening up this room to let people come in. I know I speak for myself, but I'm sure I speak for others.
Oh, Chad, right at the so sorry, right at the end there you cut out, but I heard most of what you said.
I'm just saying thank you so much for letting people like us come in and to experience the history of your building.
Yeah, the feeling is mutual because I've gotten just as much back from it and continue to, and the house as well. So, and I find that the majority of people are super genuine and respectful, and I think that's what it's all about. So, yeah, thank you for having me, really.
Yeah, thank you. And everybody out there, if you want to book Bowers Mansion, look up the Bowers Mansion restoration.
Yeah, man.
And I'm Chad with Friday Night Frights. Thank you guys for being here.
Awesome. Thanks, Chad.
You're welcome. Have a great night.
You too. Awesome. Thank you so much. That was awesome.